We always talk a lot at the start of the summer about protecting your skin from the sun. Did you know every 50 minutes one person in the U.S. dies from melanoma, a type of skin cancer, the most serious type, the second most aggressive tumor right behind pancreatic cancer, in fact. And so we wanted to focus on that more today. Joining me now is Dr. Deepak Narayan. He's a surgical oncologist at Yale. I'm really happy you're here, doctor, because not only are you an oncologist, dermatologists we have on talking about this a lot, and certainly they have a point of view, but you've done very deep research into melanoma, and there's a lot of confusing information about what sunscreen can and can't do to fight it. So let's cover these topics right here. First of all, melanoma, there's no cure for it, correct? So what is melanoma and why does it affect so many people?
Right, so it's not truly correct to say that melanoma has no cure. If caught early, it can be cured with almost 100% success rate. So the issue with melanoma is that most people equate it with other types of skin cancers like squamous cell or basal cell. And unfortunately, this is the most lethal form that you get. In fact, about 80% of the deaths that arise from skin cancer are caused by melanomas. So you've got to be particularly careful about that.
Can you show us here where
so
the areas of concern are?
that's a model for skin. So that's the top layer called the epidermis. As you go down, you get to the dermis, and then you get to the fat. And this model doesn't quite show it, but the melanocytes, so the pigment cells, rest in this layer. So when the UV rays beat upon the skin, these cells can actually transform into malignant cells, and that's how melanoma begins.
All right, time to talk about prevention. That's what this is all about.
Absolutely.
After all. As recently as in the past month, there's been new research that's come out, peer-reviewed research, talking about how sunscreen has its limitations. You can slow melanoma, you can't stop the onset of it. What is a family to do? What's a parent to do?
Well, number one, the fact to remember is that you have to use sunscreen and use it often. The problem with sunscreens is that once people put it on, they think they're invincible, and therein lies the problem.
Well, first of all, when we talk about sunscreen, let's talk about that SPF factor first.
Right.
Always aim for what, 35 and up?
35 and up works just fine.
Okay.
And so once you put it on, you have to use, say for instance, a shot glass full every 2 hours or so, especially if you're at the water's edge.
Yeah, and we brought this out here. I made a joke about how is tequila a part of the plan here, and you said no. This is an indication of how much more you need to put on. And I don't think very many people at all repeat apply.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what the problem is. And so if you don't use it right, yes, you can always say that sunscreen caused problems because you haven't actually used it the way it's supposed to be used.
Should you put it back on every time you go in the water and then come back out again? What type
So
of regularity?
every 2 hours would be a good rule of thumb. So if you get into the water, probably if you're going in more often than that, earlier applications would definitely help.
And then you also say, hereditarily particularly, if you have an inclination to be for melanoma, just stay out of it. You have to do other things besides just sunscreen. Sunscreen does not solve everything.
Absolutely. And so some people are genetically predisposed to having melanomas, and those people have to be additionally careful. I think to avoid sun during the peak UV time, say between 9 and 3 a.m.
Right.
or 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. would be a wise thing to do. And the Australian government, which obviously has a lot of melanoma to deal with, had this campaign in the 80s and 90s where they asked you to slip on a shirt, slop on some sunscreen, and slap on a hat. So, protect yourself from UV rays in any which way you can.
We're going to put up a list of reminders here, and while we do, talk about one more in particular, and that's check those moles often.
Right.
What does that involve?
So one of these things is that moles can be precursors to melanomas, and I think the important thing is for people to visit their dermatologist on a regular basis, and they can help by checking their own moles on a regular basis. Say, at least twice a month. Yeah. Look at it, make sure you know what the moles look like, and you're the best judges when these things change and when they alter.
Well, we've got 2 days coming up here, folks, where it's going to be just clear, piercing, unadulterated sunshine. So this is a great time to put some of these things into effect.
Absolutely.
And this is serious business. You can't just you can't finesse this anymore. Thank you so much.
Thank you.